They called him the weakest cowboy in the entire Arizona territory. He walked with a limp so bad that children would stop and stare. He flinched at loud noises like a beaten dog. He never carried a gun. Not once. Not ever. So when 11 of the most dangerous outlaws in the Southwest rode into his quiet little town, everyone knew exactly what would happen. The weak cowboy would be the first to die. They were wrong. Because those outlaws had no idea what they were riding into. They had no idea about the debt that had been owed for 3 long years. They had no idea about the oath sworn over a fire in the Apache Hills. And they certainly had no idea about the 77 warriors who were watching from the ridgeline. Waiting. Patient. Ready to ride down like a storm from hell itself. By sunset the outlaws would learn the truth. By sunset most of them would be begging for their lives. This is the story of Elijah Thorne. The man everyone thought was broken. The man everyone thought was weak. The man who had an entire Apache war band ready to die for him. And nobody knew. Not until it was far too late. Now before we dive deep into this incredible story, I want to know something. If you are joining us on this Western adventure from anywhere in the world, drop a comment right now telling me where you are watching from. Are you in Texas? California? Maybe you are watching from the UK or Australia or somewhere I have never even heard of. Let me know. I read every single comment and I love seeing how far these stories travel. Alright. Let us ride. The town of Bitter Springs, Arizona was not much to look at. A single dusty main street. A church with a crooked steeple. A saloon that had seen better days. A general store. A bank that was really just a reinforced room in the back of the assay office. Maybe 300 people lived there. Ranchers mostly. A few miners. Some merchants trying to make an honest living on the edge of nowhere. It was the kind of town that the rest of the world forgot about. The kind of town where nothing ever happened. Until the spring of 1879. That was when the stranger arrived. He came alone. Riding a horse that looked almost as tired as he did. He had a small cart behind him with everything he owned in the world, which was not much. His name was Elijah Thorne. At least that is what he told people. Whether it was his real name, well, nobody ever found out for certain. He was thin. Not lean and muscular like the cowboys who worked the range. Just thin. Like he had been sick for a long time. Like life had been slowly draining out of him for years. But the first thing people noticed was not how thin he was. It was the leg. His left leg dragged when he walked. It did not bend right at the knee. Every single step looked painful. Every single step looked like it took effort that most people could not imagine. He moved slow. He moved careful. He moved like a man who had learned that the ground could betray him at any moment. The townspeople watched him ride in that first day. They watched him climb down from his horse, wincing with every movement. They watched him limp into the general store to buy supplies. And they started talking. Who was this stranger? Where did he come from? What happened to his leg? Nobody knew. And Elijah Thorne was not offering any answers. He bought a small plot of land about 2 miles east of town. Nothing special about it. Scrub brush and rocks. A creek that ran dry half the year. Barely enough grass to feed a handful of cattle. The previous owner had given up on it years ago. Said the land was cursed. Said nothing good would ever grow there. Elijah Thorne did not seem to care. He paid cash. He signed the papers. He moved into the tiny cabin that was falling apart at the seams. And he got to work. Now here is where things got strange. Here is where people started forming opinions about Elijah Thorne. Opinions that would turn out to be completely wrong. See, the other ranchers in the area, they worked hard. They built fences. They branded cattle. They rode horses like they were born in the saddle. Elijah Thorne could barely lift a fence post. People would ride by his property and see him struggling. See him stopping to rest every few minutes. See him sitting in the shade, breathing hard, his face pale with exhaustion. The whispers started almost immediately. "That man is not going to last a month," one rancher said. "Feel sorry for him," said another. "Whatever happened to him, it broke more than just his leg." "Waste of good land," said a third. "Someone ought to buy him out before he starves to death." But Elijah did not starve. He did not give up. He did not sell. Day after day, week after week, he kept working. Slow. Painful. But steady. He was not building a successful ranch. He was building something else. Something that looked a lot like hiding. The first time anyone heard Elijah Thorne speak more than a few words was about a month after he arrived. The local doctor, a man named Samuel Whitfield, rode out to check on the new settler. It was something he did for all the newcomers. Part neighborly concern, part professional curiosity. What he found shocked him. Elijah invited him inside the cabin. Offered him water. Sat down across from him with that permanent wince of pain that never seemed to leave his face. Doc Whitfield asked if he could examine the leg. Elijah hesitated for a long moment. Then he rolled up his trouser. The doctor went quiet. The leg was a mess of scars. Twisted. Misshapen. The bones had clearly been broken in multiple places. Not just broken. Shattered. "My God," the doctor whispered. "How are you even walking on this?" Elijah shrugged. "Stubbornness, I suppose. This should have been amputated. Any surgeon worth his salt would have taken this leg off. The risk of infection alone. How did you survive?" "Someone helped me." "Oh, what doctor could have?" "Not a doctor." Elijah rolled his trouser back down. His face made it clear the conversation was over. Doc Whitfield left that day with more questions than answers. He told a few people in town about what he had seen. About the shattered leg that should have killed its owner. The rumors grew. Some said Elijah was a war veteran. A soldier who had been wounded in some terrible battle. Others said he was a criminal. A man who had been tortured for his crimes. Others said he was cursed. Touched by something dark. Nobody guessed the truth. The truth was stranger than any of them could have imagined. Now I need to tell you about the guns. Or rather, the lack of them. In 1879 Arizona Territory, everyone carried a weapon. Everyone. It was not a choice. It was survival. Apache raids still happened. Bandits roamed the roads. Wild animals could kill a man who was not prepared. Going without a gun was like going without water. Foolish. Dangerous. Potentially fatal. Elijah Thorne did not carry a gun. Not a rifle. Not a pistol. Not even a knife on his belt. Nothing. When he came to town he was completely unarmed. When he worked his ranch he was completely unarmed. When he traveled the roads between he was completely unarmed. People noticed. Of course they noticed. "Hey there, stranger," a cowboy called out to him one day in front of the general store. "Where is your iron?" Elijah looked up. "My what?" "Your gun, man. Where is your gun?" "I do not carry one." The cowboy laughed. He looked at his friends. They laughed too. "You do not carry one? In Apache country? Are you trying to get yourself killed?" Elijah did not answer. He just turned and walked away. Limping. Slow. His shoulders hunched like he was trying to make himself smaller. The cowboys shook their heads. Another word got added to the growing list of descriptions for the strange newcomer. Coward. But here is the thing that really sealed Elijah Thorne's reputation. Here is the thing that made everyone in Bitter Springs absolutely certain they knew exactly what kind of man he was. It happened about 2 months after he arrived. Elijah was in town buying supplies at the general store. The place was busy. A dozen people milling around. The normal buzz of conversation and commerce. Then out in the street someone fired a gun. It was nothing serious. Just a cowboy being stupid. Firing into the air because he was drunk and happy and did not have the sense God gave a mule. A single gunshot. Loud. Sudden. Unexpected. And Elijah Thorne fell apart. I mean that literally. He dropped to the floor like someone had cut his strings. He curled up into a ball. His hands went over his head. His whole body started shaking. Everyone in the store stopped and stared. The shaking went on for almost a minute. When it finally stopped, Elijah uncurled himself slowly. His face was pale. His eyes were distant. Unfocused. Like he was seeing something that was not there. He got to his feet without looking at anyone. He left his purchases on the counter. He limped out of the store and did not come back to town for 2 weeks. Word spread fast. Shell shock. That was the term people used. The war between the states had ended 14 years earlier, but its ghost still walked. Men who had seen too much. Men whose minds had been broken by the things they witnessed. Everyone assumed Elijah Thorne was one of them. A broken soldier who had come west to escape his memories. They felt sorry for him. Some of them anyway. Others felt contempt. A man who could not hear a gunshot without falling to pieces? What use was a man like that? Either way, the verdict was unanimous. Elijah Thorne was weak, damaged, pathetic. A man to be pitied at best, ignored at worst. Not a single person in Bitter Springs considered him a threat. Not a single person considered him important. Not a single person imagined that this trembling, limping, broken man held a secret that would save all of their lives. Months passed. Elijah settled into a routine. He worked his ranch alone. He raised a few cattle. He grew vegetables in a small garden behind his cabin. He survived. Barely. Once a week he came to town for supplies. He spoke to shopkeepers in a soft voice. He never argued about prices. He never complained about anything. He went to church every Sunday. Always sat in the back row. Always left before anyone could talk to him. He was invisible. The kind of man that people looked through rather than looked at. The townsfolk got used to him. The way you get used to a stray dog that hangs around the edges of town. You know it is there. You do not really think about it. Elijah Thorne became part of the background. Part of the scenery. A fixture that nobody paid attention to. That was exactly what he wanted. What nobody knew was that Elijah Thorne was watching. Waiting. Living every single day with a weight on his shoulders that would have crushed most men. He was hiding from something. Running from something. And he was praying that his past would never catch up with him. It was a prayer that would not be answered. Now I need to introduce you to the other players in this story. The men who thought they were the predators. The men who did not realize they were about to become prey. The Crawley Gang. Even if you have never heard of them, you know the type. Every territory had men like this in those days. Outlaws who operated beyond the reach of law. Killers who preyed on the weak and the unprotected. Marcus Crawley was their leader. 42 years old. Built like a bear. A thick beard that hid a face full of scars. Eyes that had gone cold sometime in his 20s and never warmed up again. He had 11 men riding with him. Each one wanted by the law in at least 2 territories. Each one with blood on their hands. Each one loyal to Marcus Crawley because Marcus Crawley was the meanest and the smartest of them all. They had been raiding across Arizona for 3 years. Small towns. Isolated ranches, stagecoaches carrying payroll. They had learned which targets were easy and which targets were hard. They avoided towns with strong sheriffs. They avoided towns with vigilance committees. They avoided anywhere that might actually fight back. Bitter Springs had been on their list for a while. See, Crawley did his homework. He sent scouts ahead. He gathered information. He knew exactly what he was riding into before he ever got there. And what he learned about Bitter Springs made him smile. The sheriff was 62 years old. His name was Tom Hendricks. He had been a good lawman once about 20 years ago. Now his knees were bad. His eyesight was worse. He kept the peace through habit and reputation, not through any real ability to enforce it. The town had maybe 40 able-bodied men. Ranchers and merchants. Family men who had never been in a real gunfight in their lives. No vigilance committee. No organized militia. No telegraph to call for help. Easy pickings. The plan was simple. The plan was brutal. The plan had worked before. They would ride in on a Sunday morning. While everyone was at church. Maximum confusion. Minimum resistance. They would take the bank. They would take the general store. They would take anything and everything worth taking. Anyone who resisted would be killed immediately. Made an example of. The rest would be too terrified to do anything but watch. By the time anyone could ride to the nearest army post or marshal's office, the gang would be long gone. Vanished into the mountains. Untraceable. Uncatchable. It had worked in Tucson. It had worked in Prescott. It had worked in a dozen small towns whose names most people had already forgotten. It would work in Bitter Springs. At least, that is what Marcus Crawley believed. August 17, 1879. A Sunday morning like any other. The sun rising hot and bright over the desert. The sky that endless blue that made you feel small and insignificant. The people of Bitter Springs woke up, did their chores, put on their Sunday best. They walked to the little church with the crooked steeple. They filed into the wooden pews that creaked with every movement. The preacher was a young man named Wilson, fresh out of seminary, full of fire and passion, still believed he could save the world one sermon at a time. He was just getting warmed up when the sound of hoofbeats drifted through the open windows. A lot of hoofbeats, moving fast, coming closer. Preacher Wilson stopped mid-sentence. The congregation turned toward the windows. Some of the men stood up. Then the gunshots started. Not aimed at anyone, just fired into the air, announcing arrival, announcing dominance. Through the windows, the townspeople watched as riders spread out across the main street. They counted them. 11. No. 12. Each one armed. Each one moving with the confidence of men who knew exactly what they were doing. A woman in the third pew started crying. Someone told her to hush. Someone else started praying out loud. Sheriff Tom Hendricks pushed his way toward the door. His gun was at home. He had come to church to pray, not to fight. Before he could reach the door, it slammed open. Two outlaws stood there, guns drawn, smiling. "Morning, folks," one of them said. "Church is in session a little longer today. Nobody leaves until the boss says so." The door closed. The sound of a heavy beam being placed across it from outside. They were trapped. Out in the street, Marcus Crawley was enjoying himself. He loved this part. The moment when a town realized what was happening. The way fear spread from face to face. The way tough men suddenly looked like scared children. Power. That was what this was about. Not just the money. The power. He rode his horse slowly down the main street, taking his time, letting everyone get a good look at him. A few people were outside. An old man who had been sweeping his porch. A woman who had been hanging laundry. A child who had been playing in the dirt. They all froze when they saw the riders. They all knew what was happening. "Everyone stays calm, everyone stays alive," Crawley announced. His voice carried in the morning stillness. "We are here for the money, not the blood. Give us what we want and we will be on our way. Cause trouble?" He let the sentence hang. He did not need to finish it. His men spread out. 2 to the bank. 2 to the general store. 2 guarding the church. The rest watching the streets, making sure no one did anything stupid. Professional. Efficient. Practiced. Crawley dismounted in front of the saloon. It was empty this time of morning, but the door was unlocked. He walked in, helped himself to a bottle of whiskey, and sat down to wait while his men did their work. Easy money. Easy day. Or so he thought. Now here is where the story takes a turn. Here is where everything changes. Because there was one person in Bitter Springs who was not in church that morning. One person who was not trapped. One person who saw the outlaws ride in and did not freeze in fear. Elijah Thorne. He had overslept. His leg had been hurting more than usual the night before. He had tossed and turned until almost dawn. By the time he finally dragged himself out of bed, the church bells were already ringing. He was just leaving his cabin, still buttoning his shirt, when he heard the gunshots in town. He stopped. His hands started trembling. His breathing got fast and shallow. That old familiar panic started rising in his chest. For a long moment he stood perfectly still. Eyes closed. Fighting the fear. Fighting the memories. Then something happened. Something shifted inside him. His hands stopped trembling. His breathing slowed. When he opened his eyes, they were different. Harder. Colder. He did not run toward town. That would be suicide. He did not run away from town. That would be cowardice. He turned east. Toward the hills that rose in the distance. Toward a place he had hoped he would never have to visit again. And he started walking. Fast. Ignoring the pain in his leg. Ignoring everything except the destination. He had a debt to call in. "All right. Now I need to take you back in time. 3 years back. To a different place and a different Elijah Thorne. Because the man who lived in Bitter Springs? The weak, trembling, broken man? That was not who Elijah had always been. Once upon a time, Elijah Thorne was dangerous. In 1876, he was a cavalry scout. Worked with the United States Army tracking Apache bands across the territory. It was hard work. Brutal work. The kind of work that broke most men eventually. The Apache were fighting for their homeland, fighting with everything they had. They knew the territory better than any white man ever could. They could disappear into the rocks and reappear miles away. They could survive on almost nothing. They were some of the finest warriors the world had ever seen. The army was fighting to take that homeland away, to push the Apache onto reservations, to make the territory safe for settlers and miners and railroads. It was not a fair fight. It was not a clean fight. It was not a fight that had any heroes, no matter what the newspapers back east wanted people to believe. Elijah had stopped believing in the mission years before. He had seen too much, done too much. The things that happened in the name of civilization would haunt him for the rest of his life. But he had nowhere else to go. No family. No prospects. No skills except tracking and surviving. So he kept working. Kept scouting. Kept telling himself that he was just following orders. Until the day he could not tell himself that anymore. Summer of 1876. A patrol of 30 cavalrymen plus scouts. Elijah was one of 3 scouts leading them through the mountains. They had been tracking an Apache band for almost a week, following trails, reading signs, getting closer every day. The lieutenant in charge was a man named Patterson. Young, ambitious, eager to make a name for himself before his tour ended. He wanted blood. He wanted a victory he could write home about. He wanted promotion and glory and all the things that young officers wanted. What he did not want was truth. Elijah tried to tell him, tried to warn him. Sir, the tracks we are following, they are not war party tracks. Too many small footprints. Too many travois marks. This is a family band. Women and children. Patterson did not want to hear it. Apache are Apache, scout. Every warrior has a family. We find the families, we find the warriors. Sir, I really think. You are not paid to think. You are paid to track. Now do your job. Elijah did his job. He led them right to the Apache camp. What happened next? I'm going to tell you, but I need you to understand something first. This was not unusual. This was not a rare occurrence. This was policy. The government wanted the Apache problem solved. They did not much care how it was solved. And the men who implemented that policy, some of them were honorable soldiers just following orders. But some of them were monsters who had found a place where their monstrous nature was not just tolerated but rewarded. Lieutenant Patterson was one of the monsters. The camp was in a small canyon. Maybe 50 people. Some warriors, yes, but mostly women, children, elderly. They were not prepared for an attack. Why would they be? This was a hidden place. A safe place. A place to rest and recover before moving on. The soldiers hit them at dawn. There was no warning. No demand for surrender. No attempt to separate warriors from civilians. There was just screaming and gunfire and blood. Elijah watched it start. He watched Lieutenant Patterson shoot an old man who was trying to stand up. He watched soldiers chase down women who were trying to run. He saw a sergeant grab a young mother. Saw what the sergeant intended to do. Something broke inside Elijah Thorne in that moment. Something that had been bending for years finally snapped. He did not think. He did not plan. He just moved. He tackled the sergeant. Threw him off the woman. Started hitting him with his fists. Other soldiers turned to look. Confused. What was happening? Why was the scout attacking their own man? The moment of confusion was enough. The young mother ran. She grabbed her child. She disappeared into the rocks. Other Apache saw. Other Apache ran too. A handful of women. A few children. They fled into the cracks and crevices of the canyon while the soldiers were distracted. Elijah kept fighting. He punched Lieutenant Patterson when the officer tried to grab him. He screamed at them to stop. To look at what they were doing. To see the children they were murdering. Nobody listened. But those few seconds of chaos? Those few seconds when the soldiers did not know what was happening? They saved lives. Maybe a dozen people escaped that canyon because of Elijah Thorne. It was not enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. The soldiers did not appreciate what Elijah had done. They did not appreciate it at all. When the killing was over, When the canyon was quiet except for the crying of the wounded, Lieutenant Patterson turned his attention to the scout who had attacked his men. "You are a traitor," Patterson said. His face was red with rage. His uniform was spattered with blood that was not his own. "You are a traitor and a coward and an Apache lover." Elijah stood his ground. "Those were women and children. That was not war. That was murder." Patterson smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "Hold him down." Four soldiers grabbed Elijah, threw him to the ground, held his arms and legs. Patterson picked up a rifle, held it by the barrel. "You want to side with the savages? Fine. Let us see how well you survive like one." He brought the rifle stock down on Elijah's left leg. The bone cracked. Elijah screamed. Patterson hit him again, and again, and again. By the time he was finished, Elijah's leg was shattered in multiple places. He was barely conscious. Blood was pooling beneath him. "Leave him," Patterson ordered. "The desert will finish him. Or the Apache will find him and take their revenge. Either way, he will not be telling anyone what happened here." The soldiers mounted up. They rode away. They left Elijah Thorne in the dirt next to the bodies of the people he had tried to save. They assumed he would be dead within hours. They were wrong. Elijah should have died. There is no medical explanation for why he did not. His leg was destroyed. He had lost blood. He had no water, no food, no shelter from the brutal sun. He crawled. For 2 days he crawled through the desert, inch by inch, rock by rock, dragging his ruined leg behind him. He did not know where he was going. He did not have a plan. He just knew that he was not ready to die. Not yet. Not like this. On the 3rd day the Apache found him. Now put yourself in their position for a moment. Think about what they saw. A white man in cavalry clothes, lying in the desert, half dead. This was the enemy. This was one of the people who murdered their families. One of the people who burned their homes and stole their land. They had every reason to kill him. Every justification. It would not have been murder. It would have been justice. But the Apache who found Elijah were from the same band that had been attacked. And word had spread among the survivors. The women who escaped the canyon had talked. They told stories about the scout who went crazy. The scout who attacked his own soldiers. The scout who gave them time to run. The warriors looked at the broken man in front of them. They recognized the cavalry uniform. But they also recognized something else. The bruises. The shattered leg. The evidence of a brutal beating. This man had not just been left behind. This man had been punished. They faced a choice. Vengeance or honor. The easy path or the hard one. They chose honor. Elijah woke up in an Apache camp. He did not know how long he had been unconscious. Days maybe. A week. An elderly woman was tending to his leg. She had set the bones as best she could. Splinted them with wood and rawhide. Applied poultices that smelled like nothing Elijah had ever encountered. He tried to speak. His throat was too dry. The woman gave him water. Small sips. She spoke to him in Apache. He did not understand the words, but he understood the tone. Rest. Heal. You are safe. Safe. In an Apache camp. The irony was not lost on him. For 3 months, Elijah lived among the people he had been paid to hunt. His leg healed. Slowly. Imperfectly. He would never walk right again. But he would walk. During those months he learned. He learned their language. Their customs. Their stories. He learned that everything he had been told about the Apache was either wrong or incomplete. They were not savages. They were not mindless killers. They were families. Farmers. Hunters. Parents who loved their children. Children who played games and laughed at jokes. They were people fighting to survive in a world that wanted them gone. The shame Elijah felt during those months was almost unbearable. Every kindness they showed him was a reminder of what his people had done. Every meal they shared was seasoned with guilt. But there was something else too. Something unexpected. Connection. Belonging. Purpose. For the first time in years, Elijah Thorne felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The leader of this particular band was a war chief named Cowboy. He was young for such a position. Maybe 30 years old. But he had earned the respect of his warriors through courage and wisdom in equal measure. He had 77 fighting men loyal to him. 77 warriors who would follow him into any battle, face any enemy. Qaeda watched the white man who lived among them. He watched him struggle to walk. Watched him learn their words. Watched him sit with the elders and listen to their stories with genuine interest. He saw something in Elijah Thorne that he had never seen in a white man before. Shame. Real shame. The kind that changes a person from the inside out. One night, about 2 months into Elijah's recovery, Qaeda sat down beside him at the fire. They had spoken before. Brief conversations. Practical matters. But this was different. Qaeda stared into the flames for a long time before he spoke. You saved lives. At the canyon. When your people were killing, you fought them. Elijah shook his head. I did not save enough. I was too slow. Too weak. I should have. You did what you could. You chose your path. Now you walk a different road. Silence. The fire crackled. Somewhere in the darkness, a child laughed. Qaeda continued. The debt between your people and mine can never be paid. Too much blood. Too many dead. But between you and me. He turned to look at Elijah. His eyes were steady. Serious. Between you and me there is balance. You gave lives. We gave life. The debt is settled. Elijah did not know what to say. He had not expected forgiveness. He had not expected anything except maybe a quick death. More than settled, Qaeda said. You're a brother now. Not white. Not Apache. Brother. You understand? I'm not sure I do. Qaeda smiled. It transformed his face. Made him look young and almost mischievous. It means if you ever need us we will come. This is oath. Sacred. Cannot be broken. He held out his arm. Elijah looked at it. Looked at Qaeda. Looked at the fire. Then he clasped the war chief's arm with his own. If you ever need me, Elijah said, I will come too. Qaeda laughed. Weak leg. Soft hands. What will you do, brother? Limp at our enemies? Shake at them until they surrender? Despite everything, Elijah found himself smiling. Whatever I can. I will do whatever I can. The laughter faded. Qaeda's expression grew serious again. That is all anyone can do. That is enough. They sat together until the fire burned low. Two men from different worlds, bound by blood and honor. Brothers. When Elijah could finally walk, he knew he had to leave. The army was still looking for him. Lieutenant Patterson had reported him as a deserter and a traitor. There was a price on his head. As long as Elijah stayed with the band, he put them in danger. The army would use his presence as an excuse for another attack. More women and children would die because of him. He could not allow that. Qaeda understood. He did not argue. He just nodded and began preparing a horse. Where will you go? West. Far west. Somewhere nobody knows me. You will change your name? I will change everything I can. Start over. Try to be better than I was. Qaeda handed him the horse's reins. A bag of supplies. A knife. Go far, brother. Find peace. Forget the killing if you can. Elijah mounted the horse. His legs screamed in protest, but he ignored it. I will never forget, he said. I do not deserve to forget. Qaeda looked up at him. Then remember us well. Remember we showed mercy when we could have shown cruelty. Remember that we are not the monsters your people believe us to be. I will remember. I will remember everything. Qaeda stepped back. Go. What? And if you ever need us. I know. You will come. Elijah rode west. He did not look back. He could not look back. He rode until the sun set and rose and set again. He rode until he found a town called Bitter Springs. A nothing town in the middle of nowhere. The perfect place to disappear. All right. Now we are caught up. Now you understand who Elijah Thorne really was and what he was hiding. Let us go back to that Sunday morning in August. Let us go back to the moment when Elijah heard the gunshots and everything changed. Elijah moved through the desert as fast as his ruined leg would allow. Every step was agony. The bones that had been shattered 3 years ago had never fully healed. They ground against each other with every movement. But Elijah did not slow down. He could not slow down. In his mind he saw the church. Saw the families he knew were inside. Saw the children who would be terrified, not understanding why bad men were hurting their town. He thought about the woman at the general store who always gave him extra sugar because she felt sorry for him. He thought about the old man who sat on his porch every evening and waved as Elijah limped past. He thought about the preacher who had never once judged him for sitting in the back and never speaking. These people had shown him kindness. Small kindnesses. The kind that most people do not even notice. But Elijah noticed. Elijah remembered every single one. They were his community. His neighbors. Maybe the closest thing to family he would ever have. He would not let them die. 3 miles east of town there was a ridge. High ground that overlooked the entire valley. Qaeda had shown it to Elijah during his recovery. A meeting place. A signal point. If you ever need us, Qaeda had said, go to the high ridge east of wherever you are. Build a fire. Make smoke. We watch the horizon. We will see. Elijah had nodded but never expected to use the knowledge. He wanted peace. He wanted to disappear. He wanted to leave the violence behind him forever. But violence has a way of finding people whether they want it or not. He reached the ridge by mid-morning. His leg was bleeding where the old scars had torn open. His lungs burned. His vision was blurred with exhaustion and pain. He did not stop. He gathered brush, dry wood, anything that would burn. He built a fire on the highest point of the ridge. When the flames were strong, he added green branches. The smoke changed. Thick, white, visible for miles. He pulled off his shirt and used it as a blanket, covering the fire, releasing the smoke in patterns. 3 puffs. Pause. 3 puffs. Pause. 3 puffs. The signal Qaeda had taught him. The call for help. Come. Trouble. Come. Then he waited. He sat on that ridge, bleeding and exhausted, and watched his smoke climb into the endless blue sky. He watched the town in the distance. He could see riders moving in the streets. He could imagine what was happening. Were people being hurt? Were people being killed? He did not know. He could only hope he was not too late. Time passed. The sun climbed higher. The smoke kept rising. Maybe Qaeda was dead. The Apache were being pushed onto reservations. Hunted. Killed. 3 years was a long time. Maybe the band had moved too far away to see the signal. Maybe the oath had been forgotten. Elijah had no backup plan. If the Apache did not come, he would return to town. Unarmed. Limping. Alone. He would probably die. He accepted that. 1 hour passed. Then 2. The smoke kept rising. Elijah kept watching. His hope began to fade. He started thinking about how he would approach the outlaws. What he would say. Whether there was any chance at all of talking them into leaving. There was not. He knew there was not. Men like that did not negotiate. Men like that only understood force. Force that Elijah did not have. He started to stand. Started to prepare himself for the long walk back to town and the short life that would follow. Then he saw the dust. From the mountains. A cloud of dust rising into the air. Riders. Moving fast. A lot of riders. Elijah's heart started pounding. He shaded his eyes against the sun and watched. The dust cloud grew closer. He could make out individual shapes now. Horses. Men. He started counting. 10. 20. 30. 40. Still more coming. Streaming out of the mountain passes like water through a broken dam. 50. 60. 70. Elijah felt tears on his face. He did not wipe them away. 77. 77 Apache warriors riding hard toward the ridge where a broken white man sat bleeding and crying and thanking God for the honor of people who had every reason to let him die. Qaeda rode at the front. He was older now. His face harder. The years since they had parted had not been kind. But his eyes were the same. That fire still burned. He pulled his horse to a stop in front of Elijah. He looked at the smoke fire. He looked at the town in the distance. He looked at the bleeding leg and the exhausted face of his brother. "You call. We come." Elijah's voice cracked. "Qaeda. I was not sure. We watch. We always watch. You think we would forget our brother?" Elijah shook his head. He could not speak. Qaeda dismounted. He walked to where Elijah sat and crouched down beside him. "Tell me." Elijah took a breath. Steadied himself. "Outlaws. 11 men, maybe 12. They have the town. They locked the people in the church. Families. Children." Qaeda nodded slowly. His expression did not change. "You want us to save them. The white people who think you are weak. The white people who laugh at you." "Yes." "Why?" Elijah looked toward the town. Toward the steeple of the church that he could barely see from this distance. "Because they are my people now. My community. Maybe they do not know it. Maybe they would not want it if they did know. But they are mine. And I could not protect anyone before. I could not stop the killing at the canyon. Maybe I can stop it here. Maybe this time I can do something that matters." Qaeda studied him for a long moment. Then he stood. He turned to his warriors. He spoke rapidly in Apache. Elijah understood most of it. "White men. Killers. Church. Families. We ride." The warriors began checking their weapons. Some carried rifles taken from soldiers and settlers over the years. Some carried bows. All carried knives and war clubs. Qaeda turned back to Elijah. "You ride with us." Elijah looked at his leg. Looked at his empty hands. "I have no weapon. I can barely walk." "You will ride behind Grey Wolf. You will not fight. But you will be there. Your people will see that you called us. They will understand." Elijah nodded. He struggled to his feet. A young warrior guided a horse toward him and helped him climb on behind. It was not dignified. It was not heroic. Elijah Thorne rode toward battle clinging to another man's back like a child. But he rode. That was what mattered. He rode. Back in Bitter Springs, things were going exactly as Marcus Crawley had planned. The bank was cleaned out. His men had loaded everything of value into saddlebags. The general store had been stripped of guns, ammunition, and anything else worth taking. A few townspeople had tried to resist. A young man who worked at the livery stable grabbed a pitchfork. One of Crawley's men shot him in the shoulder. Not dead, but not fighting anymore either. The message was clear. Resist and suffer. Cooperate and survive. Most people cooperated. Crawley was in the saloon, working on his third whiskey of the morning. His men were finishing up. Another hour and they would be gone. Easy money. Then Billy Tucker came running through the door. Billy was the youngest of the gang. 18 years old. Dumb as a box of rocks but good with a rifle. His face was pale. His eyes were wide. "Boss. You need to come outside. Right now." Crawley followed Billy into the street. His other men were already there, gathered in a loose group, all of them looking east. Crawley looked east. His blood went cold. On the ridge east of town, silhouetted against the morning sun, a line of riders stretched across the horizon. Apache warriors. More than Crawley could count at a glance. Sitting perfectly still on their horses. Watching. "How many?" Crawley asked. His voice was steady but his hand moved toward his gun. "I count 70, his lieutenant said. "Maybe more. It is hard to tell with the sun behind them." Crawley had 11 men. 12 counting himself. 70 Apache. At least. Those were not good odds. Those were not survivable odds. Where did they come from? Why are they here? We did not do anything to them. Nobody answered. Nobody knew. For 10 long minutes nothing happened. The Apache sat on the ridge. The outlaws stood in the street. The townspeople watched from windows and doorways, too terrified to move. Then a single rider broke from the Apache line. He walked his horse slowly down the ridge. Slowly across the flat ground toward town. Slowly up the main street until he stopped about 100 yards from where Crawley stood. A single rider. Unarmed. Or at least not holding a weapon. Crawley recognized a parley when he saw one. "Stay here," he told his men. Anyone shoots, I'll kill them myself. He walked out to meet the Apache. Kaida waited patiently while the white outlaw approached. He had seen men like this before. Predators. Scavengers. Men who fed on the weakness of others. He felt nothing but contempt. The outlaw stopped about 10 feet away. Close enough to talk. Far enough to run. What do you want? The outlaw asked. Kaida spoke English well. He had learned it from soldiers and settlers over the years. He had learned it so he could understand his enemies. You take things from this town, Kaida said. What is it to you? Since when do Apache care about white settlers? Kaida did not answer the question. Instead, he pointed toward the edge of town. A figure was limping toward them. Thin. Weak. Moving slow. Elijah Thorne. Crawley stared at the pathetic cowboy approaching. This was the man everyone laughed at. The man who flinched at gunshots. The man who could barely walk. What does he have to do with anything? Kaida's voice was flat. Cold. He is brother. His enemies are our enemies. His debts are our debts. Crawley tried to process what he was hearing. Him? That cripple called you? He called. We came. This is how it is between brothers. Crawley looked at Elijah. Looked at the Apache on the ridge. Looked at his 11 men who suddenly seemed very small and very vulnerable. Look, Crawley said. We do not have any quarrel with you. This is between us and the town. We will take what we came for and leave. The cripple can keep his farm. We will not touch him. Kaida shook his head slowly. You came to kill. We came to kill. Someone will die today. You choose who. The moment stretched. Crawley felt sweat running down his back despite the cool morning air. He was not a coward. He had killed men. He had faced death before. But this was different. This was 70 Apache warriors who would slaughter his entire gang and not lose a single man doing it. He thought about fighting. For about 2 seconds. His lieutenant was right. They would be massacred. We are leaving, Crawley said. Kaida nodded. Leave everything. Money. Guns. Horses. Now wait just a minute. Everything. Walk out of town. We let you live. Stay and die. Choose. Behind Crawley, his men started muttering. This was humiliation. This was unacceptable. But then they looked at the ridge again. At the warriors who had not moved. At the rifles and bows waiting to be used. One by one they started dropping their guns. Crawley watched his men disarm. Watched them hand over the money they had stolen. Watched them dismount and hand over their horses. He looked at Kaida. He looked at Elijah Thorne, who had finally limped close enough to hear the conversation. You, Crawley said to Elijah. I will remember you. Elijah met his eyes. There was no fear in them. Not anymore. No, you will not. You will forget this ever happened. Because if you tell anyone that you were run off by Apache warriors because of a crippled cowboy, no one will ever take you seriously again. Your reputation will be destroyed. He paused. But if you come back here, if you ever threaten this town again, you will not walk away. You will not walk at all. They will find pieces of you scattered across the desert for the coyotes to eat. Crawley stared at the weak man who suddenly did not seem weak at all. Walk, Kaida said. West. Do not stop until you cannot see these mountains anymore. The Crawley gang walked out of Bitter Springs. 11 hard men. Disarmed. Humiliated. Walking into the desert with nothing but the clothes on their backs. Some of them would die out there. The desert was not forgiving to men on foot without water. Some would survive. They would drift to other territories. Change their names. Never speak of what happened. None of them would ever raid again. The townspeople of Bitter Springs emerged slowly from their hiding places. They came out of windows and doorways. They came out of the church when Kaida's warriors removed the beam from the doors. They stood in the street and stared at the impossible scene before them. Apache warriors everywhere. Dozens of them. Armed. Dangerous. And in the middle of it all, Elijah Thorne. The weak cowboy. The broken man. Standing beside the Apache war chief like they were old friends. Like they were brothers. Sheriff Tom Hendricks pushed his way through the crowd. His face was a mask of confusion. Thorne? What is happening? How did you, what is? Elijah raised a hand. His voice was tired but clear. "It is all right, Sheriff. They are not here to hurt anyone. They came because I asked them to come." "You asked them?" "Oh. Why would Apache warriors come because you asked?" Elijah looked at Kaida. Kaida nodded. "It is a long story. The short version is that they saved my life 3 years ago. We swore an oath. Today I called in that oath to save yours." Silence. The townspeople looked at each other. This made no sense. Nothing made sense. The preacher pushed forward. Young Wilson, still in his church robes. "Mr. Thorne, are you saying that you have been friends with these people this whole time? While living among us?" "Not friends exactly. Brothers. There is a difference." "Brothers? But they are." Wilson stopped himself. He looked at the warriors surrounding them. "They are Apache." "Yes. And you are." "I am whatever they will have me be. I owe them my life. More than that. I owe them my soul." Kaida stepped forward. The townspeople stepped back. The fear was still there. Years of stories about Apache raids. Years of terror. But Kaida ignored their fear. He walked up to Elijah and clasped his arm. "Brother. Debt is paid." Elijah shook his head. "There was no debt. You owed me nothing. You gave us time. At the canyon. Women and children escaped because you fought your own people. This was debt. Now debt is paid." He reached into a pouch at his belt. He pulled out a small leather bundle. Pressed it into Elijah's hands. "From the elders. They say thank you. They remember." Elijah opened the bundle with trembling fingers. Inside was a beaded medicine bag. Intricate. Obviously precious. "I cannot accept this." "You cannot refuse. It is given. Wear it. Remember us." Elijah's eyes were wet. He clutched the medicine bag like it was the most valuable thing he had ever held. "Will I see you again?" Kaida's expression grew sad. "The world is changing, brother. My people are being pushed to reservations. Hunted. Killed. Soon there will be no free Apache. Soon there will be no more rides like today." He looked around at the town. At the people who feared him. At the world that wanted his people to disappear. "Remember us well. Remember we were not only killers. Remember we had honor. Remember that we came to save white people because one white man showed honor when honor was hard." Elijah nodded. He could not speak. Kaida mounted his horse. He looked down at his brother one last time. "Live well, Elijah. Find peace. You have earned it." He turned his horse toward the ridge. Toward the 76 warriors waiting for him. The Apache rode away. They disappeared into the hills like ghosts. Like legends. Like the last gasp of a world that was dying. Elijah watched until he could not see them anymore. Then he kept watching anyway. Bitter Springs was never the same after that day. The story spread. It spread like wildfire across the territory. The weak cowboy with the Apache army. The outlaws who ran away on foot. The 77 warriors who appeared like something out of a legend. People came from miles around to hear the story. To meet Elijah Thorne. To ask him how a broken white man had earned the loyalty of Apache warriors. Elijah refused to explain. He refused to elaborate. He refused to betray any secrets about Kaida's band or their movements. Some called him a hero. He rejected the word. "Heroes stop massacres," he told Preacher Wilson once. "I watched a massacre happen. I just flinched at the wrong moment and it saved a few lives by accident." "God works through accidents," Wilson replied. Elijah did not argue. But he did not believe it either. The years passed. Elijah stayed in Bitter Springs. He kept working his little ranch. He kept coming to town for supplies once a week. He kept going to church on Sundays and sitting in the back row. But things were different now. People talked to him. People invited him to dinner. People treated him like a member of the community instead of a ghost on the edges. He accepted some of the invitations. Not all of them. He was still a private man. He still carried burdens that he would never share. But he was no longer invisible. He was no longer alone. The Apache were forced onto reservations over the next few years. Just as Kaida had predicted. The warrior bands that had roamed free for generations were rounded up. Confined. Their way of life destroyed. Qaeda himself was killed in 1885. A skirmish with cavalry near the Mexican border. He was 34 years old. Elijah learned about it months after it happened. A traveler mentioned it in the saloon. Just casual conversation. Did you hear about that Apache chief who was killed? The one called Qaeda? Elijah did not react. He finished his drink. He paid his tab. He walked home. He locked himself in his cabin for 3 days. When he came out, his hair had turned gray. He never talked about Qaeda again. But every single day for the rest of his life he wore the medicine bag around his neck. Under his shirt. Close to his heart. Elijah Thorne died in 1912. He was 71 years old. He died in his sleep. Peaceful. Quiet. The way a man should die after a hard life. They found the medicine bag around his neck when they prepared his body for burial. 33 years he had worn it. It had never left his skin. His will left his ranch to the town of Bitter Springs. The land was used to build a school. That school still stands today. Someone added a plaque above the door years later. It reads, "In memory of Elijah Thorne, who was never as weak as he seemed." So what is the lesson here? What does this story tell us? It tells us that the outlaws saw what they wanted to see. They saw a weak man. An easy target. A victim waiting to happen. They did not see the truth. They did not see the years of pain that had forged Elijah Thorne into something harder than iron. They did not see the choice he made in that canyon when he stood against his own people to save lives. They did not see the bonds that had been formed in blood and fire and honor. They did not see the 77 warriors waiting in the hills. Strength is not always loud. Strength is not always obvious. Sometimes strength hides behind trembling hands and a limping leg. Sometimes strength looks like weakness to people who do not know how to see. Real strength is about the bonds you forge, the oaths you keep, the people who will ride through fire for you. Elijah Thorne had an army. He just never told anyone. He never needed to prove anything. He never needed to boast. He just waited. He just lived his quiet life. And when the time came when his community needed him, he rose. That is what true strength looks like. And if you are lucky, if you live your life with honor and courage, maybe you will find people who will ride for you too. Alright everyone. That is the story of Elijah Thorne and the 77 Apache warriors. If this story moved you, if it made you think, hit that like button. It helps more than you know. If you are new here and you want more stories like this, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss one. And remember that question I asked at the beginning? Where are you watching from? Drop that comment. I want to know how far this story travels. Until next time, stay strong. Stay honorable. And remember that the people around you might be carrying more than you could ever imagine. Take care.